Hello everybody. As I promised in my previous video that I'm going to talk about Islamic banking and I'm going to explain what do I think about of Islamic banking. So here I am. Let's dig into Islamic banking and see whether it's better than the conventional banking or it's just an oxymoron. Islamic. So what is banking? We all remember we talked about that banking is how does banking work? They work on fractional reserve basis, right? Means every dollar that they get, they lend up to 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times the money that they don't have. They just create money out of thin air. And we also know that in Islam, riba is haram, is not permissible at all. It's strictly prohibited, and there's a very harsh ruling about riba. It says if you are involved in riba, it's like you are in a war with Allah and His Messenger, peace be upon him. I mean, to me, that was good enough to quit my banking job when I was working at a bank. When I was a young woman, I graduated from college and I started a job at a bank. And of course, I wasn't very practicing Muslim. My family never enforced Deen very much. It was just the very basics. So I used to work at a bank, and my husband, he's at the time he wasn't my husband, obviously. Um, he had $100,000 in the bank, and I said, "Why don't you open the money market?" And interest rate was pretty high at the time. I think we were offering 4% or 5% something on money market. If your balance was 100,000 or more, and I said, you make 5%. He said, "Well, no, interest is haram. I'm not." I was like, "Oh, come on, what are you talking about? Just give it to me if you don't want it, right?" So he opened the money market account because I asked him so, and at the end of the year, his accumulated interest was, I think, a little over $2,000. So he said, "Okay, just give me the tax that I'm going to pay on this $2,000, and you can keep the rest." And so just so you know, we're Muslims, we can marry our cousins, and he's my first cousin too. So he was my cousin, obviously. So he said, "You keep that interest. I'm not taking it, but just give me. But I have to pay tax on the $2,000. So you just give me whatever amount from that interest so I can pay the tax because IRS can consume haram. I'm not going to do it." And I kept that $1,800 in my pocket, and I was like, "Yes, I'm so happy." But that's, may Allah forgive me. That was, of course, haram income that I had earned, and I didn't know at the time. I wasn't very practicing Muslim. So then, when I found out, I read a hadith somewhere which said, sorry, I read this ruling about interest and riba, and it said whoever involves in interest is declaring a war against Allah and His Messenger, and that was enough to shake me as a Muslim to my core. And I said, "Am I at war with Allah and His Messenger?" And that happened very late when I started studying my religion, and I started to decide, like, I'm a Muslim, but I don't know what it means to be a Muslim, right? So I decided to study my faith and my religion. And I one day got up and I went to my boss and I handed her my 2 weeks notice and I said, "I'm out of here." But before that happened, obviously, it didn't happen like overnight. It took me some time. I was sitting at the bank, and one of my client, he was from Bangladesh. His name was Imam Mehdi, I still remember. And he used to come to me all the time. And one day I said to him, he was looking to buy a four-family home. And I said, he was a very young guy. And I said, "Are you going to get a mortgage from me?" And he said, "No, because my Abba says we're not paying interest. Rather, he's going to get halal loan from this halal mortgage that they were selling at the time." And I said, "There's such a thing as halal mortgage?" He said, "Yeah, they have halal financing or Islamic financing." I said, "That's weird." I said, "What's the interest?" I said, "They don't charge you interest?" They said, "No, they charge us profit." And the interest that they were charging at the Islamic banking, it was higher than the interest that the conventional mortgages would cost them. And I said, "Oh, come on, you're going to pay higher money to them, but you're not going to get the mortgage from me." Of course, being a salesperson, it was my job to sell the products because we get commissions and bonus. And he said, "Yeah, I wish I could do it, but my dad won't let me do it." And I said, "Okay." So I said, "Okay, give me the phone number of those halal banking guys or Islamic banking guys. I would see what it's all about." And he said, "I'll have him call you." And I said, "Okay." So the guy called me, And I had started studying religion at the time, but I wasn't like, I didn't have a deep understanding. I still don't have deep understanding, obviously, but I didn't even know didn't even know the basics at the time. So the guy called me and he said, so I heard that you have a house and you have conventional loan on this. It's haram, you know that in Islam it's prohibited. So you can you can refinance with us, and we are 100% riba free. Islamic financing, and he started. I was like, so how does this work? He said, well, we don't call it interest, we call it profit. And I said, so how does this work? He said, well, it works like, let's say you bought a house for $100,000, you put 10% down, so you own 10% of the property, and then the 90% is like you're renting it from us, so you're paying us the rent. But in the documents, we're going to write down that, okay, the value of the property is $200,000, so you owe us $200,000. And there's no interest involved. So we're agreeing to a fixed price ahead of time, and that's where you sign the documents for. And we're charging you that rent, which amount that I was paying in interest was their rent amount. And he said, once that you're going to pay 200,000 or a little over 200,000 anyway over the course of next 30 years. So we're just saying the value of the house is 200,000, and we both agree upon. So there's no interest involved in it. And me being as naive, I didn't understand it very well. And I said, but how is this any different? He said, well, you know, chicken is chicken. When you eat a halal chicken, I don't think it tastes. And when you eat non-zabiha chicken, they both taste the same. They're both chicken, but one is halal and one is not. And I said, okay, yeah, makes sense. You know, they're both chicken, but one has the name of God when we slaughter, so that becomes halal. The other one doesn't. So yeah, okay, fine. And I said, okay, fine, I'll get back to you. My husband came home and I asked him, I said, hey, I'm going to refinance my house because we're paying riba. Riba is haram. And, you know, I was studying Deen very newly, and I was very enthusiastic and very motivated. I'm not going to have anything to do with this haram product. And my husband said, okay, so how does that work? And I explained it to him, and he said, no, that's a bull and a bull. We're not doing it. And I was like, but why? He said, basically, if we get $100,000 tomorrow, right now, let's say we have $90,000 on our, at the time we had, I think, $150,000 on our home that we owe to the bank. And he said, if tomorrow I come up with $150,000, and he's saying you have to sign the agreement that the value of the house is 300 and they loaned us $300,000, I can come up with 150 tomorrow and I pay them, but we can't pay off our house because apparently we agreed to a price that a house is worth $300,000 when in reality it's not. So now they're forcing you to pay interest, a higher interest rate, and for 30 years. And if you want to pay them right now, you have to pay them $300,000. They just made $150 from you like that. And not to mention the other interest. So of course, thank God that he told me not to do this. So I was happy. I was like, I was not happy. I was very upset. Like, well, you don't understand. It's haram. We shouldn't be doing this. He said, no, not doing it. And we had an argument about it. A few years go by and I realized, okay, maybe he wasn't that wrong, because when I started studying Islamic banking, there was nothing Islamic about it. It's like an oxymoron. Like the the definition of Islamic banking is no different than the definition of conventional banking. You know, remember we talked about the bank works on fractional reserve basis, and we also know that excess or extra money on money is riba. But when you're taking extra money on the money that you don't have and you're lending it to people and then you're charging, and you know, that's anything beyond riba. That's riba plus the sin plus an illegal activity plus an open crime and a form of fraud. So how is that Islamic by any means? And the core fundamental of the Islamic banking is based off of fractional reserve system. From what angle Islamic banking is halal? They're doing the same exact thing. They're taking the money from the depositor, lending it out to the people millions times, 100,000 times, 1,000 times, the money that they don't even have. Then on top of that, they're charging them the profit. From what angle is that halal? And when I read this, I was like, wow, what a fraud being committed with the Allah Almighty Himself. May Allah forgive them all who are doing this. I was like, I'm so glad that my husband didn't let me do it. If anything, the main purpose of interest-free economy is so there is equal distribution of wealth and people don't suffer and people don't become vulnerable. Whereas this Islamic banking system is actually doing worse than what the conventional banking system is doing. It's still causing those people who are the Islamic banking CEOs and owners, they're just making them rich, and the people at the bottom, like the borrowers, are still suffering the same way that they're suffering with conventional banking, except now they're being hit with a higher percentage of profit that they're paying. So let's say conventional banking mortgage was 4.5%. I think my house was 5.5%. They were charging like 6 and 6.5%, something like that back in 2005. I'm talking about a while ago. And I was like, thank God my husband, and then, I just got mad at my husband for no reason. I'm so glad that he didn't let me do it. There's nothing Islamic about it. And I mean, you can't rubber stamp something with the Islamic Sharia compliant and then say, here's Islamic product. We're going to replace the word interest with the word profit, and we're going to call it Islamic. It's not. The core, it is rotten to the core so deeply, just like conventional banking system, that there is no way out of it. You cannot have a banking industry and call it Islamic and then say it's a Sharia compliant. Who are you deceiving? You cannot deceive anybody. You're not deceiving God, because He knows what's there. He knows what's inside me. People don't understand, but He understands. And if you ever have been involved with the Islamic mortgages or Islamic loans, they're called murabaha, commodity murabaha. They're also, I think there's one other term that they use. Sorry, I'm not very familiar with it because I never got Islamic mortgage ever in my life, and I have no desire to do so. If I'm going to commit a sin with conventional banking. At least I'm committing a less valuable sin because I'm paying lower interest than this Islamic banking. I think that one was commodity murabaha, the other one was mudaraba and musharaka. There are like so many different kind of loans that they offer. I'm going to talk about these in detail in my next video. But by just putting these Islamic names and rubber stamping it with the word Islam in it, you cannot call it Islamic. Islam and bank cannot go together. There's Islamic finance, there's no Islamic banking. The whole foundation of banking system is just the way that it can never be Islamic. So that's why I call it an oxymoron. That's like, it's just not going to be Islamic. So those people who are getting these Islamic finance and Islamic loans, they're just being fooled by these people. These people are still going to be your typical conventional mortgage individuals. And the people who actually invented Islamic banking, those were the people who came from the regular conventional mortgage industry, and they were non-Muslims, and they were given some guidelines. This is what Islam wants, and we need you to create a product which will fit our needs. And they came up with the product, and then they said, okay, here's your Islamic product. So it's like, I was actually talking to somebody, he's not my friend, but he was at the top. A friend of mine knew him, and then we had a dinner after work one day, and we were talking about this whole thing, and he was obviously non-Muslim, a Christian, and he said, well, you take alcohol and you just follow the ruling that it cannot be intoxicated, it cannot toxicate your brain, and you can make it diluted so it doesn't toxicate your brain, so your decision power doesn't get affected. So that fits the Islamic parameters. So there you go, now you have halal alcohol. And I'm like, my mind was bogged, and I was like, see, these people can never understand what Islam wants from us. And then he said, well, that's how the Islamic banking is working, because they basically made it acceptable and permissible in Islam by making some changes to the conventional banking industry. And it was mind-boggling to me. And I was like, these people will never understand. They're not living it. We as Muslims are living it. And we are handing over our wealth, our hard-earned money to these people who are diluting it. And then they're rubber stamping it with the word Islam. And they say, well, this fits the parameters of the Islamic ruling, so it's permissible. And now you guys can go ahead and borrow the money from us. and now you call it Islamic, and now you're not declaring a war against Allah and His Prophet. You're still declaring a war against Allah and His prophets. Maybe God will forgive you. I hope He forgives you, and I know, inshallah, He will forgive you because it's not your fault. And He will forgive you because your intentions were right. At least you were making some effort to do whatever is available out there outside of conventional banking. But you're not fooling anybody. You're just fooling yourself. And now that I've made this video, and if you're watching it, now you know better that Islamic banking is not Islamic. But at the same time, if you're an educated individual and there's so much information available on the internet, you can just do a little bit of research and see whether Islamic banking is true Islamic or not, because Allah will question you for that. And He will say, well, who were you deceiving? You were trying to fool me. I am not being fooled by you. If anything, you wasted your wealth in the world, and now you're going to be questioned. But I know, hopefully, inshallah, He will forgive all of us who have made those kind of mistakes. But anyways, so when I came back and I was talking to this friend of mine, remember I told you there is a guy, he worked with me, he was Christian and he was youth minister. We used to have these kind of discussions all the time. And I said, well, you guys will never understand. You guys will never learn what it means to have non-alcoholic life. You cannot dilute alcohol and make it so it doesn't affect our brain, and now it fits in the ruling of Islam, and there you go, now you can call it Islamic alcohol. That's not how it works. And I said, we live it, we sleep it, we just practice it every day. That's not how Islam is. You cannot. So then he asked me what is the solution. So we were talking about lots of things, and he was very and because I was studying Deen very closely at the time, and this was obviously my job. And ever since I read that ruling that you're declaring war against Allah and His Prophet, I started digging deep into it. And because I had studied economics and I took a class, I took out my book and I started reading it in more details, because back then I was doing it just to pass my exam and get a degree, but now I had to read it for other reasons. Then I started reading more books. I would go to the library and I would pick up books on Islamic finance and Islamic economic system, and what is it to have free economy in Islam, and how was the state of Medina's finance managed. And there's so many books, there's so many resources. You can all educate yourself. I'm not saying to read so many books, but at least you can, now we have Google, so you can search up all these things and just educate yourself. So he actually asked me to teach a class at his church to his youth group, sort of, because he used to teach young kids. And I was like, you want a Muslim woman to go to a church and teach Islamic finance to Christian children? And he said, yeah. And I was like, I don't think that's a very good idea, because I was like, if anything, first of all, I walk into that church and they're going to say, what is a Muslim woman doing at a church? And I said, second, if they see that this woman is teaching Islamic banking and Islamic finance and Islamic economics at a church to our Christian children, I said, my death is imminent. And we just made a joke about it. He said, no, trust me, people at my church are very nice and they're very open-minded. And I said, why don't you go and talk to the parents first before I come and commit to this, because it is going to be a nightmare if I just walk into that church and they just kick me out of there. And so the bottom line is, he liked this model so much that I will present later on in my next video. He was like, well, okay, we have no other choice. So if you want to have a better economic and banking system, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I have this, and this choice. This is what my prophet did. This is how the state of Medina was ruled. And he was like, wow, never thought of that. And he loved it so much that he wanted me to go and teach his youth group on a Sunday, at least once a month at a church. I was just not very comfortable, so I never did it, because it was not too long after 9/11, and people still were very, they were not comfortable with any Muslims, period. So I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I said, I can prepare the lectures for you and you can go ahead and deliver them. He said, well, as you said, I don't live it, I don't sleep it, I don't live by these rulings. I won't be able to explain them as well as you can, because that's your faith. You understand it better. I said, no, trust me, I'm very new to it as well. I'm learning it myself deeply now, so you'll probably do as good of a job as I would. So I did prepare some lectures for him, and I don't know if he ever delivered them or not. But the point is that there is a solution. Again, we cannot change the world economy. We cannot change the world finance. We cannot, our words don't mean anything. I know when Jerome Powell opens up his mouth, it could collapse the entire market or it could boom the entire market. When Donald Trump opens his piggy mouth, same thing happens. But you and I, we can scream and nobody will care. So we cannot change the world. We cannot change the society. But what can we change and what can we have control over is our pockets, our wallets, our household, our microeconomy inside of the house, where I am the COO of my household and I can operate, and I'm also the CFO of my household, just so you know, and I can take care of my finances, I can take care of the operations of the house, so I make sure that I'm economically stable and I'm financially stable, and I don't have to suffer the way most Americans are suffering, and the most people are suffering across the globe for that matter. I hope this video helps. Please let me know what your thoughts are on Islamic banking. If you have taken the Islamic mortgages, please let me know how your experience went, whether you agree with me or not. I've also heard some people cry about it, like, it says all they've done is change the word with profit instead of interest, and we're paying higher amount than you guys are paying on conventional mortgage. And I said, well, I sometimes you don't make a comment because it's just not necessary. So let me know how your experience was with Islamic banking, and if you've learned something and you feel like I'm just giving you some value, please subscribe to my channel, share it with those who can benefit from it. Until next video, take care and be safe out there.